various different countries across the world, the Jewish community history. Today, we're going to do part two now of the country Bosnia and Herzegovina. We did the first part, I think it was about just over a week ago, so here we are in part two territory over here. Explore some more. The rabbis will probably do another part also, I would imagine. There's a lot of great rabbis that actually came from that specific vicinity, so always a privilege to also speak about it. And we've already recorded about maybe 15, 20 rabbis that would shape the country in of its own right. So now we spoke about earlier years in the first part of the series. That's something that we very much have to point out over here. So now we are going to progress and speak more, let's just say, of the later stage of time. We spoke about how the communities would form in the early years in of itself, and from the Spanish Inquisition time period. Let's talk about the Habsburg rule. What actually occurred? We know that, for example, just to go back, Jews in the Ottoman Empire were generally well treated and were recognized under law as non-Muslims. Despite there were restrictions, I think the Jewish communities of the empire would actually prosper. And they were granted significant autonomy, various rights, including the right to buy real estate, unlike in some other locales that wasn't necessarily the case. They were allowed to build synagogues and, let's say, to conduct trade throughout the Ottoman Empire. Jews also lived along with non-Muslim subjects of the empire and were granted full equality under Ottoman rule, especially. We're going to speak about Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai, who will play a prominent role and be one of the forerunners of modern Zionism as time goes on. Let's talk a bit about the Habsburg rule, what actually happened over there at that point in time. We know that there was an Austro-Hungarian Empire occupied Bosnia-Herzegovina in the year 1878. It happened to have been. And it brought, let's say, with them at that time, an injection of European capital, companies, methods. Many professional, educated Ashkenazic Jews arrived with the Austro-Hungarians, we have to point out over here. And the Sephardic Jews would continue to engage in their traditional areas, many foreign trades and crafts in of itself. Sephardic Jews, as they had more of a stronger role in BIH, as they said, given that only in Sarajevo, Banja, Luka and Tuzla, separate Ashkenazi communities were active, whereas in Tuzla, it was the only city in which Ashkenazim were numerous, let's just say. I think someone named Hilda Zalowska was actually born. What was that? That was an art historian, apparently, an Egyptologist, a coptologist, an essayist, a novelist, a prominent expert of Coptic history and art, someone that we have to point out over here. The first time I actually heard of them, I think, was born in the year 1903, passed away in 1999. Famous Austrian, it was a woman, obviously. Let's say she was actually the eldest daughter of a very affluent Jewish lawyer, someone named Dr. Jacob, if I'm not mistaken, but I believe if anyone wants to research about her, I will do it. I'm just pointing out because just using Wikipedia as a reference over here, seemed like. And there was other famous people. I think in this period there was someone, Moshe ben Raphael Attias, would achieve very great prominence as a scholar of the Islamic faith and of medieval Persian literature. We're going to speak more about the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in due course. Maybe in the next part of the series. There's a lot of Rabbonim I want to speak about here in today's page of the Gemara. My friends over here, so that's very, very interesting. Friends, anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community. And let's talk about some of the famous Bosnian people at that point in time. There was Moshe Raphael Attias. Who was he? We're going to speak about him. He was also known as Mos Rafaelovic, and also he was known as Zeki Effendi. He is a key person in Bosnian history over here. He lived between 1845 and he passed away in the year 1916. Who was he? The Zeki Effendi. Remember, the title Effendi wasn't given to so many people. It was let's say, a very majestic title that was given to various other rabbis also. He was a historian, he was a journalist, he was a poet, he was a translator, he was a financial advisor. And what's interesting was he also studied, I believe, Islam, Persian literature and Bosnian Jewish history. He is regarded as one of the most important personalities of the history, let's just say, of Sarajevo. So he's a key person in the history of Sarajevo, happens to be a Jewish person. He actually came from a very prominent family of Sarajevo Sephardic Jews, especially in the late Ottoman times. He would spend most of his active life during the Austro-Hungarian administration, I believe, of happened to the, let's just say, I think Yeah, just going back to it. He was very active during the Austro-Hungarian administrative of Bosnia-Herzegovina. He attended an Ottoman state school in Sarajevo, which was open to all confessions, but mainly attended by Bosnian Muslims. Apparently, he would study according to an Islamic curriculum. Remember, he was Jewish over there, but he was a prominent person. He would go on to become in Yugoslavia, in Bosnian Jewry. He would then move to Istanbul to perfect, let's say, his studies on Islamic religion and culture. He became a scholar of 13th century Persian poet and mystic Sa'adi Shirazi. So very interesting. I don't know if we mentioned in the previous class in regard to who this person actually was over here. I think he lived between 1210 to 1291, was an Iranian poet and prose writer of the late Islamic Golden Age, if I'm not mistaken, and recognized as one of the most famous poets, as they say, of the classic literary tradition. He had the nickname of Master of Speech, or the wordsmith in of itself. I'm just looking at a portrayal of him at that point in this point in time, just to say a tidbit with regards to him. I think he was a well-known traveller also, and very much part of the fabric of Shiraz in of itself, respectively. So the Zeki Effendi would actually do his studies within regards to him, we have to point out. Also, what more can we say about Mos Rafael Atias? I think Atias may have even become a Jewish Sufi. It said that Atias got the title of Effendi, a scholar of Islam, which I think was very visible from the Latin inscription on his grave. He was known in obviously latter years as the Zeki Effendi. And friends, we recorded a video with regards to Zeki Effendi nearly about 2 years ago. He would return to Sarajevo. He joined the Ottoman civil service. He worked for the tax authorities. He remained in town as a financial advisor after the Austrian-Hungarian takeover of the capital in 1878. He was one of the founders and the treasurers of the Sarajevo Jewish Society. It was actually called the La Benevolencia, for where he would keep, let's say, correspondence with the Angel Polidio in Madrid. He was also the president over there of the Khevra Kadisha. He also spoke 8 languages, I believe. He used to write in a standard Castilian Spanish language rather than Ladino, usually used by Jews from Sarajevo. And but he would use a Hebrew alphabet also. I think in 1908, if I'm not mistaken, his voice was recorded by Julius Subak on his trip to Sarajevo with Abraham A. Capon. I think this record is kept at the Vienna Phonogrammachiv, together with the 1907 recording of one of his poems. In 1911, the Zeki Effendi would make a tour of the Balkans together with a renowned Spanish scholar of Sephardic valedry, someone named Manuel Manrique de Lara, recording oral texts from the Sephardic culture of Bosnian Herzegovina and Serbia and Kosovo, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So that's very, very interesting. We have to point out over here. I believe he died in Sarajevo on July the 2nd in 1916. All newspapers published in Sarajevo at the time announced his death. He was very well known. Someone named Laura Papo Bohrata dedicated a memorial article to Zeki Effendi a few months after his death. More precisely on the last day, I think it was on the year 1916. But I don't think it was ever published. It was a famous writing in of itself. Laura Papo Bohrata, I think, was a Bosnian feminist, a writer, a translator, and really researched, let's say, to the condition of Sephardic women in Bosnia and Herzegovina. She is considered the first Bosnian feminist and the first in the entire Balkans, interestingly enough. So this is very, very interesting tidbit within regards to just her. Also, when we're exploring Bosnian Jewish history, so we have to mention her also. I have to point out over there. Now, I believe also he was buried in the old Jewish cemetery in Sarajevo. His gravestone contains inscriptions in 3 scripts, in Hebrew, in Latin and Arabic. His gravestone is possibly the only Jewish gravestone in the world containing both the Hebrew and Arabic scripts. So he's a famous... But sadly, it's reported over, I don't know if all his descendants, but it says over here in Wikipedia, his descendants did not survive the Holocaust, sadly. I don't know if he has any other descendants or not. If anyone does descend or is aware of that, please write a comment within regards to that. And it's actually interesting. I think someone named Abraham A. Capon commissioned Zeki Effendi to write an authoritative history of Bosnian Jews. And I think it was in 1901, Zeki Effendi published it under La Historia de los Judios de Bosna, History of the Bosnian Jews, in the short-lived Sarajevo Ladino periodical La Alborada, which is under the pen name El Amante de la Luz, if I believe. over there, just to point out over here. And I think it would famously, there'll be the story of the Megillah di Sarajevo, if I'm not mistaken, over there. I think there's a whole article within regards to that. So I think we did in the video which we recorded about the Zeki Effendi, we did speak about it over there. And it's actually interesting. Various different chronicles will actually talk about the Zeki Effendi, if I'm not mistaken. He was very, very famous key man in Bosnian and Yugoslav history, without a doubt. I think even the Sarajevo Times would actually commemorate him. And I think, actually, we'll state this over now, I think in 2018, on July the 7th, they published a big article in the Sarajevo Times. It's actually in English. And I think it will do justice just to just say over what it says over here. A total of 200 years of Sarajevo Purim will be celebrated next year in Sarajevo. So apparently there was a Sarajevo Purim that would have been in the year 1819, if I'm not mistaken. I double check, that would have been 200 years ago, 206 years ago from now, the time recording. And Jewish historian Eli Tauber really made an effort to see that the Zeki Effendi, his memory is never going to be forgotten. An event apparently happened in the history of Jews from Sarajevo when the most prominent people of Sarajevo liberated Moshe Danon, who we're speaking about, and a dozen other prominent Jews from prison, and that happened to have been on November the 4th in the year 1819. So what happened? There was faded inscription, as we said before, in the tomb of the Zeki Effendi, represents a story of century-long cooperation of Jews and Muslims. Apparently this story seems to be forgotten. We're trying to revive it also over here, so I recommend everyone to search about him over here. Mr. Tauber believes that it is the only Jewish grave that contains, as I said before, an inscription on Arabic, Hebrew and Latin languages. And I think there's a story that Mr. Effendi, Zeki Effendi, managed to preserve, is a story of Sarajevo Purim, which Mr. Tauber what actually happened in Sarajevo Purim over here. It was during the year 1819. The governor of Bosnia, that was under the rule of Ottoman Empire back then, someone named Rusdi Pasha, would detain and threaten to kill several Jewish people in case that the Jewish community refuses to pay a large sum of ransom money at that point in time. A representative of the Jewish community went all over the city the night before the planned execution and asked various prominent Muslims to do something, let's say, to stop the executions. Since the greedy Pasha was planning to execute prisoners at dawn, so said over, the angry citizens of Sarajevo, about 3,000 of them, broke into the Pasha's palace and liberated the prisoners, wrote, I think, this Mr. Zeki Effendi at that point in time. But that was not the end. Mr. Tauber said that 249 prominent Muslims from Sarajevo, they wrote a letter and sent it to Sultan Mahmud II, in which they requested from him to place Rusdi Pasha, and Sultan received their letter and replaced Pasha. Cooperation between Jews and Muslims is not just a reminder of ancient history of Bosnia. More than 12,000 Jews lived in Sarajevo during the 1930s, and they made about 20% of the total population. So you can see the significance over there. About 2,000 Jews lived in the rest of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During the World War II, the Holocaust almost completely destroyed Jewish people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Mr. Tauber will remember, actually, over there in this article, excellent article here, some Jews managed to escape from Sarajevo. It was thanks to the help of local Muslims who disguised their Jewish neighbors in hijabs, in typical Muslim clothes, in order to get them out of the city. The situation was reversed during the aggression in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think in the early 1990s, and Bosnian Serbs surrounded the capital of Sarajevo, and Jewish people actually will then organize convoys in which Jewish people, as well as Muslims and other citizens who wanted to leave the city, managed to do so. Now, Mr. Tauber also added that according to his own research, about 15,000 Muslims managed to leave the city through Jewish convoys in of its own right. So that's very, very interesting. And very interesting. Just to add a tidbit within regards to the famous Zeki Effendi over here. So that's let's now talk about some more. We're going to talk about more the synagogues, I think, in the next part of the edition here. Let's now talk about prominent rabbis over here, prominent personalities here of Sarajevo. Let's speak about a famous rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai. we have to mention him. He lived between 1798 to 1878. He was Bosnian rabbi. He was one of the influential precursors of modern Zionism, along with Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalisha. He was a Sephardic Jew. He would play a huge process, as I say, attributed, you could say, more towards Ashkenazic Jewish community over there. Rabbi Alkali became very noted through his advocacy in favor of restoration of the Jews to the land of Israel. And many of his projects he would try and justify, but let's say be regarded as one of the precursors of modern Zionists, such as Theodor Herzl over here. He was born into a family in Sarajevo in the year 1798, and it was under Ottoman Empire at that point in time. He studied in Jerusalem, which at that point belonged to the Ottoman Turkish Empire, under different rabbis, and came under the influence, let's say, of Kabbalah at that point in time. I believe it was in the year 1828 he became reader and teacher at the Sephardic community in Semlin, and then he was its rabbi a few years later. I think Semlin today is Zemun district, the Serbian capital of Belgrade, which was, I think at the time, it was part of the Austrian Empire's military frontier. And with Rabbi Alkali's arrival, the region was experiencing strong nationalistic movements, and there was a Serbia War of Independence, which I believe at that point in time would lead to the creation of a new Serbian state after centuries of Ottoman occupation. It gave impetus at that point in time to new nationalistic ideas among Balkan Jews, such as Rabbi Alkali. And in 1852, Rabbi Alkali established a Society of Settlement of Eretz Israel in London. 1871, Rabbi Alkali visited Jerusalem and established another short-lived colonization society. In 1874, at the age of 76, he moved there with his wife, and he passed away in 1878, days after native Bosnia, at that point in time, were occupied by Austro-Hungarian and was buried in the ancient Mount of Olives Jewish cemetery. What influence did he had? A huge influence on Theodor Herzl. Now, Theodor Herzl's paternal grandfather was someone named Simon Loeb Herzl. He attended Rabbi Alkali's synagogue in Semlin, and the two would visit. The grandfather, Simon Loeb Herzl, had his hands on one of the first copies of Alkali's 1857 work prescribing the return of the Jews to the Holy Land and renewed glory of Jerusalem. Contemporary scholars conclude that Herzl's own implementation of modern Zionism was undoubtedly influenced by that relationship. Religious space for activism. You could say that was very much. Robert Alkali's view of Jewish return to the land of Israel was a religious one. He maintained, based on an ample body of religious literature, that the coming of Moshiach and divine redemption of the Jews required their return to the Promised Land. His Kabbalistic view actually made them specifically assert that the year 1840, the year of the redemption, which was not a single year but a century from the day until 1939, representing the days of the Moshiach, which is very interesting in of itself. Now, unless powerful practical steps were taken, this opportunity would be lost, and the next extended year, starting in 1940, would be one of great hardship. I'm just reading from Wikipedia here. Let's say when, with an outpouring of wrath, will gather or disperse. The outcome, the return to the Promised Land, will be the same, but under much harsher circumstances over here. So that's very interesting. Wikipedia will actually quote this over here. Now, it's actually interesting just to say more within regards to him, because he's a real key figure, let's just say, in political proto-Zionism also. He began writing in Ladino, and which limited, let's say, his outreach to the rather small European Sephardic community. Only later did he adopt the much wider understood Hebrew language, and he only intensified his political work after the age of 60. He was. At a time when I think there was wider audiences that would be able to accept his ideas. I think in the Shalom Yerushalayim, this was a Peace of Jerusalem book in 1840, he replies to those who attacked his book, I think Darchei Noam, the pleasant parts, which treated of the duty of rights. Another work of his was Minchat Yehuda, the offering of Judah. That was in Vienna in the year 1843. And I think it's a panegyric on Montefiore and the Kremlux, who had rescued the Jews of Damascus from blood libel accusation over there in of itself. Now, we've spoken about Isaac Jacob Adolf Kremix. I think he would actually be part of the Second Republic in 1840. He was a minister and the government of national defense, and he was also the president of the Alliance Israelite Universal, if I'm not mistaken, also have to point out, which we actually recorded a video on the history of that. And I think the 1840 Damascus affair reassured Rabbi Alkali that the Jews needed a land on their own to act as a safe haven. They really needed it. But at the time, the positive effect of the intervention by European powers and by a unified front of European Jewish notables who convinced him, let's just say, about the usefulness of foreign support to the success of such an enterprise. I think that Raglei Mevaser, he specifically wrote that the salvation of Israel lies in addressing to the kings of the earth a general request for the welfare of our nation and our holy cities, and for our return into repentance. Let's say over here. His plan, I think, called for the creation of a representative of assembly of Jewish notables who would advocate the Jewish case of return to the land of Israel and for settlement of land using funds collected from Jewish communities in form of a tithe, a tenth of one's income, in practice called halukah, and already used for supporting the religious groups inhabiting the Jewish four holy cities. Obviously, in Minchat Yehuda, Rabbi Alkali proposed a return to the roots, restoration of Hebrew as a national language, the recovery of renewed Jewish settlement, and for practical reasons, I believe. And in spite of being a traditionalist who very much opposed Reform Judaism, Rabbi Alkali attempted to achieve national unity. Also, eventually Zionism, we know, would apply several Rabbi Alkali's principles, such as revival of Hebrew, the purchase of land, the pursuit of agricultural labor, let's say, and a political effort towards receiving support from the world powers and for uniting all Jews behind Zionistic ideals. Let's say, yeah, so very, very interesting. Apart from creating an impressive literary outpost, Rabbi Alkali toured Western Europe, including Great Britain. This is around the 1852 time period. And we would travel Great Britain and spread his message to local communities. And the success reported was small among fellow Jews, not least due to other rabbis who considered his idea of human acts constituting catalysts for the coming of Moshiach. Some of them might have seen it as heretical. But I think that, interesting enough, I believe there were Christian British Zionists that helped him find short-lived colonization society, if I'm not mistaken. But he would write another work called the Goral La Adonai, A Lot for the Lord, which was published in Vienna in 1857 over there. And he joined the first Jewish organization for the agricultural settlement of the land of Israel, the Kolonisations-Virien for Palestinia, Association of the Colonization of Palestine, established in Frankfurt in Oder in the year 1860 by Chaim Lodge. And very, very interesting. I think Rabbi Alkali and others, such as Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalisha, put much energy into promoting its goals. The association couldn't reach any tangible results that soon dispersed over here. So very, very interesting. And yeah, we'll have to point out over here. Anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community over here. We are exploring the history of the Bosnian Jewish community history. We're exploring a few biographies of famous rabbis over here in the special edition over here. So if you are new over here to the channel, welcome to our community as we are relating over very interesting impacts and the tidbits within regards to the history of the Jewish community of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So very, very interesting to point out over here. So we can explore a bit more within regards to some more famous rabbis of yesteryear, because I think it's very, very important to speak about them here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, friends. So that point out, we just spoke about Rabbi Yehuda Alkali over here. And the plan will be to speak about more great rabbis. Remember, friends, this is the second part of the edition. We recorded a first part about a week ago, so I very much recommend everyone to watch over the first part that we recorded then. And we are going to, this will probably be maybe at least another one part, could be another 2 parts, this series in its own right, because Bosnia was a key place. And we're going to speak about the Kingdom of Yugoslavia also, we have to point out, which is also very key of those windows of time in that specific place in its own right. That's something very much we have to talk about. So anyone, if you're new, welcome to our community as we are exploring the history within regards to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So let's explore a few more profiles of famous rabbis from Bosnia over here, just to point out. From the early years, we're trying to concentrate on over here. We spoke yesterday in the previous class about Rabbi Abraham Pinso. There was another famous Rabbi Eliezer Papo, the Peliotz, who spoke about Rabbi David Pardo also. We've just spoken about Rabbi Yehuda Alkalai. There's other famous rabbis such as the famous Moshe David Gaon, who we will speak about in due course. I'm recording this here from IKEA, so we actually recorded a video, if you can recall, call over here, about Moshe David Gaon, the famous historian, Sephardic historian, in a previous video also. So that's very, very interesting over here, just to point out. So hopefully that's why I strongly recommend everyone to look within regards to that over here. So let's speak about there was another famous rabbi that lived at a later point in time. Let's speak about Rabbi Morik Levi, who was a famous Bosnian, let's say, historian, rabbi. He studied in Bosnian Jewish history. He was a principal of theological seminary in Sarajevo. Now, I think, friends, we did record a video about him. We explored, I think, the history with regards to Bosnian Rabbinic Academy. He was a key rabbi of his point in time. Rabbi Moritz Levi was. He was born in Sarajevo, I believe, in the year 1878. In his hometown, and very interesting enough, he would finish Jewish elementary school, La Al Kula, a Bible and Talmud school it happened to be, and then, if I'm not mistaken, he would go to high school in afterwards. I think in 1901 in Vienna he will enroll in two faculties, a theological and a philosophical one. He would graduate in a few years. Immediately after completing his studies, he returned to Sarajevo. And I think in 1916, a Sephardic municipality would hire him as a rabbi. Among the Sephardic Jews in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Rabbi Moritz Levi was first educated as rabbi. He spoke many languages, including Bosnian, Greek, Latin, German, Turkish, Arabic, French, and Hebrew languages. In addition to his studies as rabbi, Rabbi Moritz Levi was also a prominent professor of religious studies in Sarajevo gymnasiums, as I say, and other secondary schools. Between 1928 and 1941, he was a principal of the famous theological seminary in Sarajevo. The curriculum for the theological seminary was compiled by Rabbi Moritz Levi. Maybe we'll speak in next edition about him. We did a special edition over here on the history of Bosnian Jewish community, and it was unanimously accepted and approved by the main board of the Union of Jewish Municipalities of Yugoslavia. And he is known as the author of many scientific treatises and historical articles that was published between, let's just say, the two world wars in Sarajevo's Jewish newspapers, in rabbinic almanacs. In of itself, he was very well known in yearbooks. No problem. Have a great day. Yeah. Yeah. So we're to yeah. Great if you want to say a message about just very Okay, friends, we are going to take just a short break at the moment. I'm just here recording this here from the IKEA shopping mall, so just fulfilling a coffee. Friends, anyone tuning in live, we are recording a historic video within regards to the history of Bosnian Jewish community. We're going to continue speaking about Rav Moritz Levi in a minute, so I'll just leave you with some scenes at the moment of the IKEA shopping mall over here in Israel. Really working. We're learning in what? You're Ramadan. What? Well, it's a nice place. Which in France? How's your brother been? Yeah. You saw the video of the Brit Milah. I think you said? Yeah. Check it out. I've got a good few thousand. I'm doing a live video at the moment. So it's so cool. Okay, take care. Hi, shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient over here as we're exploring the history, Jewish community history, here of Bosnia and Herzegovina here in this special edition. So I just took a 1 minute break, but I am back and we are speaking about Rabbi Moritz Levi, who was another key rabbi here in Bosnia. So he was born in the year 1878 and he died by, I think, the hands of the disgusting Nazis in 1942. He was about 64 years of age. Let's explore a bit more about him. He was rabbi of the Jewish Theological Seminary. There was a curriculum, was compiled by him, as you said before, and he was known as an author of various different scientific treatises. Historical articles were published between the two world wars in Sarajevo's Jewish newspapers, in rabbinical almanacs, in the yearbook, calendars, and memorials over there. Now, it's actually interesting. We were speaking about the Zeki Effendi just right now. So what the Zeki Effendi failed to finish, Rabbi Moritz Levi did with his research. His most important work was Dia Sephardim in Bosnia, the Sephardim in Bosnia. He wrote this book as a contribution to the knowledge of the history of the Jews of the Balkans. It was published by the Daniel A. Kajon printing house in Sarajevo in 1911. The information provided by Levi in the book obviously is very, very valuable. Obviously based on entries made in the municipal Pincus from 1720. And let's just say at that point in time, the illustrations, the curriculum, the circumstances and events of the Jewish municipality in Sarajevo. I think of over 200 full years with information about rabbis, the founding of the Jewish community, let's say statutes in of itself, the construction of the synagogue, costumes, cultural, political, legal, and the position of the Jews and their relationship to authorities during the Ottoman Empire. The book contains valuable information about trade and economic ties, prominent Jewish public figure of the time, along with valuable contributions and material about Jewish pharmacies and doctors. And let's say thanks to this book, after the Holocaust, when all Jewish archives, libraries and documentation were destroyed, material on the past of Bosnian Jewish has been compiled based on this specific book in of itself. So seemingly it was a very, very important resource, and he was a famous person of his point in time. I recommend everyone to watch over that video we did record about him. Also, we recorded, I think it was possibly roughly about a year ago we recorded about him, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we're going to speak about more rabbis that will make their marks in Bosnia. Another key rabbi, I think, definitely in Sarajevo, was Rabbi Abraham Romano. He lived between the years 1853 to 1937 over here. So who was he? He was born actually May 1853. He passed away in 1937. He was Rabbi of Bosnia, Rabbi of Sarajevo for, I believe, many, many years, if I'm not mistaken. And he would spend the culmination of his life in Jerusalem, the capital city of Israel, which is very, very interesting that we have to point out over here within regards to the great rabbi. Okay, he was born in Sarajevo, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and yeah, he would learn under the great rabbis of Sarajevo at that point in time. Rabbi Yoshua Yitzchak Majoro, Rabbi Bechor Levi, and Rabbi Ben-Sion Pinto, if I'm not mistaken, who was another famous rabbi, I believe, in Sarajevo, and Rabbi Eliezer Papa. Remember, friends, we mentioned in we did speak about Rabbi Eliezer Papa, the famous author of the Peliuet, in the previous class over here of the of the series over here. So we're speaking now about Rabbi Abraham Romano. Yeah, so remember we spoke about Rabbi Eliezer Papa, who was the author of the Domestic Eliezer and was a famous rabbi at that point in time. I think in 1902, after the passing of the chief rabbi at the time, so there was someone named Rabbi Avram Avinon, who hopefully we will speak about in a minute over here. He was appointed Asher Kihen B'Shirato, I think in 1887, in Sarajevo, the Chachmei Udainei HaKila Lehatzaot Litmanot Latavkid Rav Rashi. In a bit of now, we will hopefully speak about Rabbi Avinon in a minute over here, because I think he's a very key rabbi over here inside this series. And yeah, I do think we did speak about him. We did record a video about him. We recorded, once again, about approximately 20 rabbis that would make their imprint in Bosnia of yesteryear. That's something that we very much have to point out over here. So yeah, they actually have an article within regards to him. We recorded a video about him 10 months ago. Rabbi Abraham Avinon was a great rabbi, so we'll speak about him in a minute over here. I think it's very, very important. Okay, so let's continue speaking about Rabbi Romano. Just I'm going to say in Roshei Kilot Ikimu Beit Din Rabbanei Umino et Avram Romano LeRosho. He was a head of the Beit Din, I believe, in Sarajevo. Letzido Kihen Hadayanim Ara Moshe Mastaro. There was another great rabbi named Rabbi Moshe Mastaro, who was known as the Cham Bechor. And Rav Yoshua Shlomo was another great rabbi. These are great rabbis. A lot of these rabbis, once again, we have spoken about here in this rabbinic series program that we've done over here, which have been materializing for previous time periods of its own right. That's something that we have to point out. Okay, so let's continue speaking about Rabbi Romano over here. Yeah, so Harav Romano Noda Kavar Takif V'Shomran. Rabbi Chacham Moshe David Gaon, who we've spoken about before, כתב כי בהיותו נער שמעו העצוב הגיע לאוזני, החרד לחריפות שקולו ולתפקידו הדתי. Moshe David Gaon, a famous historian, says, חיבר קונטרסי עם פיוט בשירות חול, כנציג הקהילה היהודית קיבל מאת פרנץ יוזף הראשון, Kisar Austria. Very interesting. Also, there was a connection over there. Choten im Semen Imperia Austria-Hungarians, if I'm not mistaken, over there. Obviously, at that point in time, there was Haskalah movement was really influencing, especially the Balkans area. Im הגיעו רוחות ההשכלה לבוסניה, נודע לו על כוונת בני הקהילה למנות תחתיו דיין צעיר, בוגר בית המדרש של רבנים בוויאנה. I think that was obviously the rabbinic seminary in Vienna. משלו הצליח למנוע את המינוי ההחליט לפרוש לגמלאות ולעלות לארץ ישראל. בית הדין הרבני בסרביה המשיך פעולתו עד the year 1917. It would be actually running in Serbia. את מונה לרב הראשי Dr. Moritz Levi. Afterwards, I think they would appoint Dr. Moritz Levi over here as the chief rabbi who just spoken about before. I think it was 1913. Rabbi Romano would actually settle in Jerusalem over there and will take on prominent positions over there. I think he was learning in or part of the fabric of the famous yeshivat Amukubalim Bet El, and then I think he would actually learn in the famous bastion of the Sephardic yeshivat in Bosnia called Horat Yosef, a place we've actually visited on the channel. במשך 24 שנותיו בירושלים התקהלו ככלל בכותל המערבי. Apparently he had the shita with regards to Kotel, the western wall over there, which I would like everyone to learn about. Over there, very, very interesting. He really felt that the Kotel Amaravi in itself had the special, kedusha attached to it, just like the Temple Mount in itself. I'll say what it says over here in Hebrew. במשך 24 שנותיו בירושלים התקיע לא ביקר כלל בכותל המערבי, משום שחשש לדעת הרדב"ז שהכותל המערבי הוא כותל העזרה, ולכן סבר שרחבת הכותל המערבי היא חלק מהר הבית שנאסר להיכנס עליו בטומאה, itself respectfully. And I think he passed away on the night of Tisha B'Av in Taf Reish Tzadik Zayin. I think it was in 1937, and he was buried in Har Hazeitim, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I think his wife's name was Rabbanit Blanca. She lived between 1852 to 1930. She came from the house of the Mandolopa family, if I'm not mistaken. That was a family that actually came from Spain, the Spanish Inquisition, if I'm not mistaken. And very interesting enough, and more can be said about him. He would have a famous son, Rabbi Menachem Romano. We'll maybe speak about him in the next edition. Maybe we'll speak about him in a few minutes. He would become the chief rabbi of Zagreb, if I'm not mistaken. He did. His grandson would be someone named Dr. Yasha Yakov Romano, who was a famous doctor from the Yugoslav one and a historian, if I'm not mistaken. He would have Rabbi Avram Romano great books called Avram and Shulchanot Shel Avram. The book, this was Zichronot, Purim, Dinim, Minhagim, stuff respectively, which were printed in Jerusalem. The Avram, I'm looking at the preface of the Sefer, if I'm not mistaken. I think it came out in the year 1927. So he had a famous son, Rabbi Menachem Romano. Maybe we'll speak about him in the next part of the edition over here. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here. We are exploring the history of great rabbis from Bosnia. We're exploring the history with regards to Bosnia and Herzegovina here on this special edition. So if you're near over here, or if you're new over here, please welcome to our community, and always welcome feedback. If you descend from any of the great rabbis we happen to be speaking about over here in this special edition, please send me an email. I would love to hear more information over here within regards to it. And we've already, once again, just to labour the point, we've already recorded about 45 countries over here. Very interesting enough. Yeah, it's a very so very, very interesting. Okay, everyone, welcome to our community. If you are new over here, and we are just exploring the history with regards to the Bosnian Jewish community over here. So here on this special day in of itself. Okay, so we want to say a word with regards to Rabbi Avram Avinon. He was around before. He was a prime rabbi, let's just say, before Rabbi Avram Avinon. He was, I think his Hilula itself was on the 26th of Adar Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, in Bosnia. He actually, very interesting enough, it says about Gedel bebeito shel Rab Moshe Pereira be'ir Travnik, if I'm not mistaken, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Very, very interesting enough. He was apparently a head of Jewish court over there and a head of Mitzvta over there for the Jewish community in the Travnik area, also a place of very interesting. So that's very interesting over there. So just inside this place, which we have to point out, and he was appointed a head of the Kehila in Sarajevo. Rabbi Avinon was. We actually recorded a video about him. I think in the year Heitaf Reish Nun Tet, he would come to Eretz Israel and live in Jerusalem and be part of the great rabbis of Sarajevo over there. He was part of the great Kehila of the Sarajevo community over there, and was, as it says over here, Allah l'Eretz Yisrael b'tkoreh b'Yerushalayim ulam anshe Kehilat Sarajevo hefziru bo rabot l'shuv ad shena'ana l'kivtzorotehem v'kihen krav Kehilat al l'ptirato. I think in the year Heitaf Reish Samach Bet in of itself. So very, very interesting in here. So he was another great rabbi from Bosnia, and really, really a decorative history in of itself. I just took those notes from the website itself. There's a famous, there's a website with regards to the history of Bosnian Jewry, which we have to point out over here. So let's explore some more with regards to famous rabbis from Bosnia. We spoke about Chief Rabbi Moritz Levi over here beforehand, and the Jewish community of Sarajevo in of itself. Let's speak about another famous Ashkenazi rabbi. I think he was in Serbia, if I'm not mistaken. And Rabbi Yitzchak Kohen Shalang, if I'm not mistaken. He was born in 18th century, passed away in 1942. And I think he would be quite important, let's just say, also in not just in Serbia, where he was based in, but also he would make an imprint in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also, and in the Yugoslavia territories in of itself. So let's just explore a bit with him. I think he was a head rabbi in Belgrade, which is the kingdom of Yugoslavia at that point in time. He was a chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Belgrade, but he would have significance. He would graduate, I think, from a rabbinical seminary, if I'm not mistaken, in the Pressburg Yeshiva, if I'm not mistaken. This was a yeshiva in the city of Bratislava, which would operate for many, many years, if I'm not mistaken. and was, I think, associated with the name of the Khatam Sofer, if I'm not mistaken, was a very large yeshiva over there. I think he would serve as a military rabbi also, if I'm not mistaken. And, much can be said about him, but he would have like quite a prominent role, I think, in Ashkenazic Jewry also, in Bosnia also, and all parts of Yugoslavia also, naturally. If I'm not mistaken, he lived at a time, obviously, he was close to Rabbi Dr. Moritz Levi. There was also famous Rabbi Shalom Freiberger over there, who was also, if I'm not mistaken, chief rabbi of Zagreb, of Croatia. And another Rabbi Mordechai Tzvi Orbach, another person who's spoken right. He was also a doctor, if I'm not mistaken, and was Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Sarajevo also. He was among his time period. He lived between 1873 to 1942. If I'm not mistaken, and which is very, very interesting. So we have to speak about him over here. Let's speak about Rabbi Mordechai Tzvi Orbach. He lived between 1872 to 1960, so he went on at a more extended time period in of itself. He was once again a key person. He was actually from the Czech Republic, if I'm not mistaken, and sadly, I think his mother passed away when he was 7 years of age, and he would learn a craft to be a shoemaker apprentice, if I'm not mistaken. He was sent to Cheder in Kiski Testin. He was educated in the Khatam Sofer's yeshiva in Bratislava, as we just mentioned before. He would stay there for a time. I think he would enroll in the rabbinical school in Budapest in Hungary. Over there, he would meet his wife from the Feldman family, if I'm not mistaken, and would study at the Faculty of Philosophy in Budapest. In 1906, he went to Sula in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He would work there as a rabbi for 5 years, and it's actually interesting. I think a lot of the congregation where he was Sephardic Jews, and there were some Ashkenazic Jews there, so he had like this diversity of itself, and so I think they would actually hold, interesting enough, various different separate ceremonies inside the synagogue, dividing between Ashkenazic and Sephardic communities, probably to make them more comfortable in of itself, respectively. I think World War I, he was mobilized as military rabbi in the Austro-Hungary army, if I'm not mistaken. He would return to Zemun over there. I think 1928, there was a Sarajevo Ashkenazic congregation over there, if I'm not mistaken. He was appointed. He had a prominent position, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, his valuable library, unfortunately, was seized by the terrible Nazis and was taken to Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. After the war, he returned to Sarajevo and would move to Zagreb. He was appointed the chief rabbi of Zagreb after the Second World War. And I think eventually he would make Aliyah with his wife to Eretz Israel. I think he died at the end in Paris, in France. We have to point out also with regards about him. So he's another, Rav Orbach was another key rabbi, let's just say, in that specific vicinity in of its own right. So very, very interesting over here. So anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. We are exploring over here the history of the Jewish community of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Some of the, let's just say, the rabbis that there were from Bosnia at that point in time. And very, very well decorative, and we're trying to really compile, let's just say, the history of itself. And it's very, very interesting to speak about various different people. Now, just going back to the Zeki Effendi, I'm not too sure if he was a rabbi or not over here. So that's something that I just have to state on the outset over here. So there was a Rabbi Moshe Danon, as we mentioned about just beforehand over here inside our community history. And Sarajevo, it's always a great place to speak about, and so on and so forth. So everyone, if you're tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. Let's speak a bit more what actually occurred during that time period during the World War II. We're going to speak about it. Let's speak about the kingdom of Yugoslavia. We spoke about the Habsburg War before. The kingdom of Yugoslavia, when World War I saw the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and after the War of Bosnia and Herzegovina was incorporated into the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. It was in 1921, a census. I think Ladino was a mother language of 10,000, also 70,000 inhabitants in Sarajevo. By 1926, there were 13,000 Jews in Bosnia. The Bosnian Jewish community remained prominent after the unification of Yugoslavia. I think in the 1920s and 1930s, Kalmi Boruch was a pioneer of Sephardic studies and Hispanic studies, and an eminent leftist intellectual, let's just say of himself. The someone named David Osmer was active in Belgrade as a progressive painter, a printmaker. Itzhak Samovileja would have a literary career, I think, in the 1930s. And as I mentioned before, there was Laura Popo Bohorato, who was a very famous feminist who we spoke about at the beginning. Let's speak about a bit about the time period of the Second World War over here. I think it was in 1940, there was approximately 14,000 Jews in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I believe 10,000 were in Sarajevo at that point in time, so the majority was in Sarajevo. There was an invasion, let's just say, of Yugoslavia in April 1941 by terrible Nazis and their allies. Bosnia and Herzegovina would come under the control of independent state of Croatia, which was, let's just say, at that point in time, a Nazi puppet state. And the independent state of Croatia was headed by, unfortunately, terrible anti-Semitic Ustasi, and they wasted little time in persecuting non-Croats such as Serbs, Jews, and Romanian people. I think it was in July 1941, someone named Mila Budak. He was a senior ministry in the Croatian government and one of the chief ideologists of the Ustav movement, declared that the goal of the Ustasi was the extermination of foreign elements from independent state of Croatia. So you can see the terrible anti-Semitism was. I think it was in September 1941 there were deportations of Jews, which began with most Bosnian Jews being deported to Auschwitz or to concentration camps in Croatia. The Ustasi would set up, I believe at that point in time, concentration camps in Krestinac, Jadovana, Metajnia, and in Slana, if I'm mistaken. I think the most, let's say, worse, it was terrible cruelty that would take place there, to unimaginable proportions against the Jewish people and Serbian prisoners, especially in Paj, and Jasenovac. At Jasenovac alone, approximately 100,000 people were murdered, half of whom were Serbs, including 20,000 Jews. By the war's end, 10,000 of the pre-war Bosnian Jewish population of 14,000 had been murdered. Most of the 4,000 who had survived, I think, did so by fighting with Yugoslav, Jewish and Soviet partisans, or by escaping to the Italian-controlled zone, if I'm not mistaken. It says that approximately 1,600 had escaped to the Italian-controlled zone on the Dalmatian coast, among them Flori Goda. The Jewish members of the Yugoslav army became German prisoners of war and survived the war. They would return to Sarajevo later on after the war. Avram Levi Lazaris would emigrate, I think, to Brazil. He became an explorer of the first mines of diamonds in Rondania. While I think Moshe Levi Lazaris, he lived between 1944 to 1990. He was a mechanical engineer, became a Trotskyite militant, if I'm not mistaken. There were righteous among the nations from Bosnia and Herzegovina at that point now. The people of Sarajevo would help many Jewish people to absorb and exfiltrate, among many, the story of Hardaga and the Kabilio families in himself, as well as Soba Drajo of the Burska families. They became very notably noteworthy after the war. The righteous among the nations from Bosnia and Herzegovina are, let's just say, those Bosnians who were honored by Yad Vashem Memorial, we have to point out over here, as righteous among the nations, i.e. non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jewish people from being murdered. I believe 49 Bosnians have been awarded the title of righteous among the nations, just reading from Wikipedia. I think in the next part we will speak about more about socialist Yugoslavia over here. That's something that we will very much want to speak about over here, which we have to point out over here. Okay, let's speak about Rabbi Avram Moritz Romano over here, who lived between 1894 to 1943. I don't think we spoke about him yet. He was also a famous rabbi. So I think he sadly was murdered at the time period of the Holocaust, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So so we will speak about him now also. So anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here. Harab Avram Moritz ben Moshe Romano. So who was he? He was another famous rabbi. He was a chief rabbi of the Jewish community of Betula. And he was appointed, I think, from 1931 until the Shoah as a chief rabbi over there. He was born, I think, in Bilnia. He came from a family of 7 people, if I'm going to say 7 children, I'm not too sure. I think Achiv Solomon, Veshlosha Achiotan, Blanca, Matilda. Versus he would learn in yeshiva in Sarajevo, and he would get rabbinic ordination. I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was a nephew of Rabbi Abraham Romano. Achienu shel Abraham Romano, asher kihen b'rabbanut b'Sarajevo, terem milchemet ha'olam harishona, before the First World War. Who nisa le'le'ah lebito Levi. He got married into the family of Levi. Her name was Rabbinit Leah. I think she lived between 1898 to 1942. She was, I think, B'lezug nolda shnei banim Avram. I think in the years they would have 2 children, one in the year 1919, one in 1921. I think between 1919 to 1923, Gihen Krab Kila Be'ilania would be appointed as a rabbi over there in this place. Let's just say in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I think from 1931. Until he passed away, he would be the rabbi of the Dobronanik Kihila in of itself. So that was very, very prominent role. 1931, Hitmanele Rabba Rashi Yudi Bitula, very prominent role over here. Remember, we did record a video. Be'et Shmona Natona Hayita Kilat Bitula. Matzav Kalkilei Bechavrate Kasher. And in 1928, Lo Kihen Rab Rashi Bikila Bita Hagerit Panim. משמועתית מהי לקהילות מבוססות יותר. הרב פעל בקרב יהודית יוגוסלביה. So it would be very much representing also Yugoslavia also in itself. במטרה לעזור לקהילה ולשקמה. הוא פרסם מספר מאמרים על הקהילה בעיתונית היהודית בכללית עיתון. Over here we have to point out over here. And yes, sorry about that. Just lost... הוא פרסם מספר מאמרים על הקהילת בעיתונית היהודית בכלל בעיתון. בהמשך ערו ליאון קמחי, there was someone, ליאון קמחי, if I'm going to say, ראש הקהילה. And ראש הקהילה, I'm just going to take a half-minute break, so just wait a minute, friends. Hello? Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Oh, okay, sure. Oh, wow. Okay, no problem. Oh, there's a problem. I can't in this place. You can't. If they put it in a, you're not allowed to take it out. They put it in a glass cup. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes. So towards the end. Okay. Yeah. So write me a text because we're going to leave at 3:00. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, sure. Okay. Take care. Okay, bye. Okay, thanks everyone for just being patient over here. Okay, so in 1940, okay, we're talking about over here now the son of Rabbi Abraham Romano, Rabbi Abraham Moritz Romano. I think from April 1941, during the Second World War, to Kvad Germania, the terrible Nazis at that point in time. Unfortunately, he was a victim to it. I think in 1942, הוצאה להרוג ביחד עם נשות הקהילה לאחרי כיבוש יוגוסלביה, נמסר הזו ביטולה לחזקת מלחמת בולגריה. I think on the 11th of March 1943, ביצעו הבולגרים הקצי במקדוניה ועצרו את יהודי החבל ובכללים בני הקהילה ביטולה, באימם הרב אברהם רומנו. העוצרים נכלאו בשטח מפעל הטבק מונופול אשר בסקופיה, וממנו שלחו עד סוף מרץ ברחובות ישירות למחנה טרבלינקה. הרב אברהם רומנו נרצח ביחד עם קהילות בטרבלינקה. So sadly, I think much of his kahila were murdered over that point in time in 1943. Now he had the son Beno Moritz Romano, ניצל מהשואה משום שגורש לשטחי בולגריה ונקלה בארנה. לאחר המלחמה הפך לאיש ציבור וחבר פורמלנט ביוגוסלביה, כיהן כשגריר יוגוסלביה בצ'ילה. נכדתו ברטה רומנה ניקוליץ כיהנה כיושב ראש קהילה היהודית בסקופיה. If I'm not mistaken, over there in that specific, let's just talk about that specific vicinity of itself. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community. As we are exploring the history of the Jewish community over here of Bosnia and Herzegovina here in the special edition. We've spoken about many rabbis already here in today's class, and there's many more that we can actually, let's just say, speak about over here. at the moment, there's actually a lot of rabbis that we can speak about, and it's always a privilege to speak about the great rabbis of yesteryear, as we are a community here and we love exploring the Jewish community history in of itself. And we can explore a bit more within regards to into this in of its own right, friends, over here. So welcome everyone if you are live, and as we explore the history of the Jewish community in of itself. So here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, friends, over here. So just taking a short break, just doing a logistic working in of itself at the moment, as I can explore a few more rabbis of the Bosnian Jewish community. Nothing like speaking up, just recording this. Anyone's wondering where I'm recording this tour from at the moment, I'm recording this actually from IKEA in the city of Bet Shemesh, here in central Israel, actually in Eshtaol area over here. So that's something that I will very much point out, as we love to explore history within regards to great rabbis of yesteryear. And it's not the first video we're recording, historic video of rabbis from Bosnia, and we're talking about more during the 1800s, 1900s time period in of itself. So that's something very much we'll have to. Let's explore a few more, let's just say, key personalities, key people here in the fabric of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's something that we'll have to point out. We're going to take another short break here at the moment, and we'll come back in a minute, friends, over here. So just watch your space, and we're going to speak about more notable people from Bosnia and Herzegovina from the more earlier years at the moment. So so just watch your space, and we'll be back in 1 minute, friends. Another break over here. Bosnia Jewish community, so there's doing a little research before Yes, sorry, friends. We're just going to be back in 1 more minute over here. Sorry about the delay at the moment. And everyone, welcome. In the meantime, if you're over here tuning in live, please subscribe to the channel as we're just going to take another very short break over here. So everyone, thanks for being patient over here as we're exploring the Jewish community history here of Bosnia and Herzegovina here in this special edition over here. So very, very interesting. We're going to speak in the next edition about Moshe David Gaon quite a lot, who was a famous educator here. I want to speak about a few more, let's say, key people over here that would really, let's say, capture in of itself the Jewish community history within regards to Bosnia. There was a lot of famous people that would become famous people afterwards. That was something that we have to point out. That family Al-Khalai, we did speak about Rabbi Yehuda Al-Khalai here at the beginning of this presentation, which is something that we have to point out about. And we're going to now speak about the Jewish community of Sarajevo over here. This is something that I very, very much want to speak about over here. There was a famous municipality in Sarajevo, which is something that we have to point out also. They actually give a list of the rabbis of the Sephardic Jewish municipality of Sarajevo in of itself. So the first one was Rabbi Samuel Baruch, I think between 1623 to 1640. It says it over here. Rabbi Sevi Hers Ashkenazi was between 1686 and 1689. There were breaks in between them. Rabbi Isaac Sevi was between 1691 and 1716. Rabbi Semtov Sevi was between 1716 and 1732. Rabbi Joseph Nakazi Avram Makaro was from 1732. It's not really stated when he was the Rabbi till. Then Rabbi Jacob Pardo Moreno was between 1768 and 1781. I think we spoke about him. Rabbi Yitzhak Pardo between 1781 to 1810. Then Rabbi Moshe Danon was between 1815 to 1830. Rabbi Meir Menachem Danon between 1830 to 1839. Rabbi Moshe Pereira between 1839 to 1849. Then Rabbi Benjamin Danon will be for a few years between 1849 to 1852. Then Rabbi Sadiq Danon would be between 1852 to 1856. Rabbi Simon Hasson between 1856 to 1858. Rabbi Avram Levi would be between 1858 to 1868. Then I think there'll be three rabbis: Rabbi Ben-Zion Pinto, Rabbi Eliezer Semtov Papo, and Rabbi Judah Joseph Finchi, if I'm not mistaken. This will all be between around 1868 to 1884. Maybe they had prime positions in the Betin over there. Rabbi Judah Joseph Finchi will be between the years 1884 to 1887. Rabbi Abraham Avinun, who we mentioned about before, will be between 1887 to 1902. Obviously, Rabbi Abraham Romano Mercado, and then Rabbi Moshe Maastero, Rabbi Josso Shalom will be, and then obviously Rabbi Morik Levi would be the last ones. There were several rabbis of the Ashkenazic community, also the municipality of Sarajevo, including Rabbi Bernard Buchwald, who was between 1885 to 1896. Rabbi Funk, I'm not sure his first name, between 1896 and 1898. Rabbi Samuel Wessel will be between 1898 to 1928. I believe will be the chief rabbi between 1902 to 1928. Rabbi Hinko Orbach. Remember, this is of the municipality of itself. And then the municipality of Sarajevo will have its own rabbis. Rabbi Menachem Avram Romano, more recently, between 1846 and 1968. Rabbi Sadiq Danon, between 1970 to 1992. Probably we'll speak about him in due course. And then Rabbi Eliezer Papo, another one, I don't know if it's the second or the third, between 1992 to 2024 over here, we have to point out over here. We're going to speak about many of the synagogues, I think the next part of the series, within regards to Sarajevo and so on and so forth, which is very interesting, very, very important. Also, we have to point out over there. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, so I think there is actually, I want to say a few words with regards to the Jewish community history of Sarajevo per se in of itself, but that will be hopefully for another later time period. So anyone tuning in live, we're exploring Jewish community history over here of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is a prime position of various different points of time, something that we very much have to point out over here. Famous rabbis, there was, let's speak a bit about the old the cemeteries of Sarajevo over here. There was old Jewish cemetery of Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina, located in Trepović mountain, if I'm not mistaken. It's the largest Jewish cemetery apparently in southeast Europe and the second largest sepulchral complex in Europe after Old Cemetery in Prague. Used, I think, approximately 400 years from the beginning of the 16th and 17th century, most likely from 1630 until 1966. It was actually established by Sephardic Jews in 1630 in Sarajevo during the Ottoman period and became the burial ground for Ashkenazic Jews after they arrived in Sarajevo with the, let's say, Austro-Hungarian Empire in the 19th century. It contains, reported over, more than 3,850 tombstones and covers an area of 31,160 square meters. It has 4 monuments dedicated to victims, unfortunately, of fascism. A Sephardi one designated to Jehiel Finki, and I think during the 1990s, a Jewish cemetery, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the front line during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina and was used as an artillery position by the Bosnian Serbs. It was thus severely damaged by bullets and fire caused by explosions. It was also heavily mined or was completely cleared. There's notable burials over here. Rabbi Samuel Baruch was the first rabbi of Sarajevo from 1630 and 1650. His grave is believed to be the oldest in the cemetery. Rabbi Isaac Pardo, who lived between 1781 to 1810. Rabbi Avram Abinon, who we mentioned about before, we spoke about, between 1856 to 1858, was chief rabbi. Mos Rafal Atias Zeki Effendi also is buried there, who we mentioned about before. Laura Papo Bohoresta, I think, and Isaac Samuel Cavilla, who was a famous Bosnian writer and a physician, and actually, we're going to speak about him, I think, in a minute. There are 4 other memorials erected to the victims of fascist terror. Inside there's a Geniza over there, a separate vault. Let's just talk about it. Or grave for damaged books, known as Geniza. I think it's located on the southern eastern part, with the first burial taking place in July 1916. I'm just going to come back in a minute and take another break. Yeah. Oh, right. You want me to buy it? Yeah, but I'm just in the middle of doing something. It'll be like 10 15 minutes. I'm just like in the middle of a video and my laptop is you don't have any water video or nothing?
לקוחות עיקרי, המסעדה הבשרית שבקומה העליונה פתוחה, הנכם מזמנים ותעברו.
So it looks like everything was on sale.
Okay, shalom everyone. Once again, sorry for the break. We're taking a lot of breaks here at the moment, and just recording this from IKEA. I keep getting seeing people I know. So we're talking a bit about the cemetery over here in in Bosnia Herzegovina. Let's talk about a bit about the Geniza also. It's a separate vault or grave for damaged books known as Geniza. It's located in the southern eastern part of the cemetery, with the first burial, let's say, taking place in July 1916. Assumption is that some 14 chests of holy books were buried in the second burial ceremony. So currently, exhumation of the Geniza is underway to determine its content. There's notable and World Heritage designation with regards to the cemetery of Sarajevo. I think in preparation for nomination for inclusion of the World Heritage Site list, Bosnian delegates, let's see, submitted a spherical ensemble of the Jewish cemetery, and there's various different documents. There's pictures also if you look online, also with regards to old Jewish cemetery of Sarajevo. So that's very much. There's also in Rogatica, there's a Jewish cemetery that was established in 1900, hosting 16 tombstones plus 10 others, probably older, stone sunks in the ground. Holy inscriptions in Hebrew, Ladino, Serbio, Croatian, if I'm not mistaken. Let's speak about it. There's also a burial site of Moshe Danon, is in Stolac, 1832, Sarajevo, Megillah, restored by Ivan Kresnius in 1990, quite recently. Let's explore a bit with regards to that other cemetery also. In Rogatikia, I'm not too sure much about it, but there's a cemetery over there. In Bosnia in its own right. I can't find out much information with regards to that. Let's just speak about Isaac Samarkovilicia. He lived between 1889 to 1955. He was a Bosnian writer. By profession, he was a physician. His stories describe the life of Bosnian Sephardic Jews. Very interesting enough. He died in 15th of January 1955. So key figure as a Sephardic historian, so it'd be good to actually record a video with regards to him. It's interesting. He was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and while one side of his family came from Spain and expulsion of the Jews from Spain, his great-grandfather moved to Bosnia from the town of Samovac in Bulgaria, which led the surname Los Samovokilius in Ladino. And after completing primary school, he went to Sarajevo. He attended the high school of Ivo Andrić, I think the first Yugoslav to win the Nobel Prize, if I'm not mistaken. He would graduate from the high school there in 1910. He would receive, I think, a scholarship from a local Jewish charity, Laban Vlčo, to study medicine in Vienna. He would later work as a doctor in the towns of Grozak in Vojvodina. And at the beginning of the Second World War, he was a department head at the Kosovo Hospital. In April 1941, he was discharged from service, as well as other Jews, but soon was mobilized as a medical doctor, fights against typhus epidemic at that point in time. In 1945, he managed to escape Yugoslavia and hide until the country was liberated. After the end of the Second World War, he held various positions in Bosnian Yugoslav literary circles. From 1948 to 1951, he edited the magazine Brazda, and then until his death, he was the editor of the publishing company in Svetlosť. He had a short essay, Rafina Avuci, which was published in 1971, and various other essays also. He did not live to, I think he would make a film, if I'm not mistaken, at later time, but he wouldn't in 1955. But he would not. He died at the age of 65 in January 1955, and he was buried in an old Jewish cemetery in the slopes of Trepic Mountain in Sarajevo. Also, he had a very famous bibliography in of itself. But that's very, very interesting. I think at the moment we are going to take a. We're going to complete this presentation over here. At the moment, there's a lot to state over, but we did speak a lot here with regards to the history of the Jewish community of Bosnia and Herzegovina. There for sure will be a part number 3. We are going to record in due course. So at the moment, this happens to have been a part number 2 over here, but will probably be another 2 more parts. We do want to state over some more biographies with regards to famous historians, famous writers of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and much, much more. That will definitely be the plan over here. Now, friends, we are a community over here. We are learning about great rabbis of yesterday. They came from various different places. In Bosnia, we're exploring about the various different countries all across the Jewish world. We happen to be speaking about Bosnia and Herzegovina here in this special edition over here. If you descend from any of the great rabbis we are speaking about here in this edition, please send me an email. I would love to hear more information on the rabbis itself. That's something I very much want to point out over here. Just recording this here. just recording this here from IKEA at the moment, and yeah, very, very interesting. So don't forget, friends, to subscribe to the channel and watch over the previous videos. This was the second part of the Jewish community history of Bosnia. I wish you well. Thanks for everyone watching here at the moment, and wishing you all blessings over here. Yeah. Okay, wishing you all a great day and thanks for watching.